In this video, we'll be covering formal charge, which is a way you keep track of your electrons. So keep in mind whenever you're calculating formal charge, you're calculating it for each specific atom, not necessarily the molecule overall at first. So how do we calculate formal charge? We have an equation. So we do our group number subtracted by the number of non-bonding electrons. Keep in mind this is not the number of lone pairs. Subtracted by 1/2 the shared electrons. Alright, so let's just start this out with an example. Our example we have is CH3OH2 with an overall positive charge of 1. So what's our first step? Our first step is to write out the Lewis structure. So hopefully you can do this yourself, and when you write it out, you find that you have your carbon bound to 3 hydrogens, bound to 1 oxygen, which in turn is bound to 2 hydrogens, and if your structure is correct, has a single lone pair. So let's see, we have our hydrogens, carbons, and oxygens. Let's first calculate the formal charge of just carbon. So we refer back to our equation, we see that it asks for the group number. So how do we find our group number? We find it through our periodic table, and eventually you'll be able to memorize this. When we look for carbon, it's over here, group number 4. Okay. So 4 minus the number of non-bonding electrons. We look over at carbon and we see that it doesn't have any non-bonding electrons, so just 0. Minus 1/2 the number of shared electrons. Alright, let's see how many carbon shares with other atoms. 1, 2, shares 2 with oxygen, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 total. So 1/2 times 8 is 4. 4 minus 4 is equal to 0. Formal charge of carbon, 0. Let's look at our formal charge of oxygen. So again, we go and we look for our group number. We can see that our group number in oxygen is 6. Okay. So 6 minus the number of non-bonding. We look over at oxygen and we see that it has 2 non-bonding. Again, we're not looking at lone pairs, we're just looking at electrons themselves. So 1, 2. 2 minus the number of shared electrons. We look over at oxygen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1/2 times 6 is 3. 6 minus 2 minus 3 is equal to positive 1. Just for fun, we can calculate the formal charge of hydrogen. Group number is 1 minus no non-bonding minus 1/2 the shared. 1, 2. 2 is equal to 0. So for the sake of being correct, we put our brackets around our molecule. We see that the formal charge of carbon is 0, formal charge of oxygen is +1, which can also just be represented by plus, and we have an overall charge of plus, or positive. So please pause the video, do the following problem, see if you can apply what you learned, and keep in mind that number 3 is an ionic molecule.